Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. I've been going through a series of presentations for the Rankin Technical College AWD Application and Web Development 1111.NET Framework with Web Databases class. And in particular, I've been going over our textbook, which is ASP.NET MVC with Entity Framework and CSS by Mr. Lee Naylor. I'm in Chapter 7. I had been having problems with my own file, so I decided for this chapter only to go back and use the one that's in the book. All right, I believe I'm now, let's see. Adding authorization at a class level. I showed you that. All right. And that. So, they say here, next we want to add the following using statements to our roles admin controller file. I think I showed you this in the last lecture. So again, here in the details section, it says that the details method is now becoming an asynchronous method. As mentioned at the end of the last presentation, let's go look up the difference of asynchronous versus synchronous. All right. This is from Wikipedia. You could go to any of them. As it says, synchronous and asynchronous transmissions are two different methods of transmission synchronization. Synchronous transmissions are synchronized by an external clock, while asynchronous transmissions are synchronized by signals. Well, okay, what the heck does that even mean? In fact, are we even getting the stuff that we need in here? All right. Well, it says here the opposite of synchronous is asynchronous. Most communications between computers and devices are asynchronous. What that means is things can be happening. All right. So again, not a great definition. So let's go look at this. What is synchronous? When you've got something that is synchronous, in an ideal world, human communication is synchronous. In other words, okay, I want to have a conversation with my wife, Sandy. Okay? All right. I initiate the conversation. She listens. When I'm done talking, she talks. When she's talking, I stop and listen. When she's done talking, I start up again. Well, if you've ever seen kids talk, all right, one of them might be talking and the other one might be talking back, and they might be going boom, 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 back and forth. That's more asynchronous. So when things are synchronous, you keep going until you're done. Now, when you've got synchronous activities with a computer, quite often what that means is, unless you're able to run things in threads, that the computer has to stop and wait for that synchronous activity to end before it can start another activity. When you have asynchronous activities, all right, with threads or the ability to run something, let's say, in the background, as an example, all right? So with that, it's not where you have to start and stop and wait. Things can be going on at the same time. All right. So again, the author said what we have done after we did all this stuff in here is we made this an asynchronous model. The author says, I cover asynchronous database access later in the book. But in simple terms, it means the program can continue with other actions while an asynchronous task is running. Hopefully you got that from what I tried to say. In this case, the asynchronous calls are made to the role manager. Find by ID async and the user manager is in role async. These methods are the key to this details method and are used to find a role by ID and determine if a user is in a role based on input parameters of the user's ID and role name. All right. So it says here the details method. In fact, let's go back and look at it. All right. So let's look at the actual code. All right. The details method has been updated to take a string named ID as an input parameter. Okay. It attempts to find a role based on this particular ID. It then loops through all the users in the application and finds all of the ones that are in the role. It then adds these users to the view bag along with the number of users so that the information can be shown in the view. It says now add a view by right-clicking on the details method and add a view called, under the roles admin, the details method. So under views, there's roles admin and the details method. There it is. They show you the code here, and they also have it in the book on the bottom of page 199 and 200. Now, what I love about this author so much is the author says here, this view is relatively simple and displays the name of a role along with a list of users belonging to that role. All right, start the project without debugging and navigate to here. All right, click on the details link to the admin role. We should now see the details for the admin role, all right, showing that the user admin at mvcbabystore.com belongs to the role. Well, we'll see that right now. My takeaway from this, though, just so you know, is the fact that the author says here, this is relatively simple. Well, no, the author says this is simple. No, he does say relatively simple. And relatively is a relative term. In other words, I don't find any of the stuff that we're doing to be relatively simple. All right? Especially when you're just learning it. So we're going to come in here, run this. We are going to roles admin details. Still loading. Bad request. Well, that isn't good at all. Again, part of the problem with this is I'm going off of the author's code. I hate doing that, but I wanted to go through this chapter for completeness sake. All right. Now, when I looked at the details for admin, there we go. I don't know how I got user 1. I believe that's the way they asked me to log in to begin with. All right, but you can see that. Okay, let's stop the run here. I'm going to keep checking my time. I'm at almost 10 minutes, but I want to keep these down now to about 20 minutes apiece. All right, we are going to start creating roles by adding a view for the get version of the create method of the roles admin controller class. All right, So there it is. Let's take a look at what's in it. All right, when this new view is created, as it says, remove the line of code that's got the H4 tag in it and add a new H2 heading. That's now no big thing. So we want to set the title and show the title. All right, okay. All right. So this is just going to put it in a form, and the author says to update the post version of the create, first add the following using to the top. Following this, update the method as shown here on the top of page 202. And the author says the key method in this code is the call to the role manager dot create async, which attempts to create a new role based on an identity role object provided as an input parameter. Again, this is an asynchronous method, and as it says, it takes a role view model as the input parameter. The method checks to see whether or not the role view model state is valid, and if it is, it creates a new identity role type variable and attempts to create this role using the create async method of the role manager. If it can do this, the index method is called, otherwise the create view is returned. So to test this, they tell you to start this up and go to the create and create a new view named users. That's how they got the users. Okay? So we'll go in and we'll try to create another one that's called, for lack of better words, let's try users 2. Again, I'm going to keep going in here and making sure that I'm not logged on. So let's right mouse click on here, view this in the browser. Again, we get bad request. Let's get that back to just roles admin. All right, create a new. We'll just put in here users 2. Create. You can see that it was created. Now we'll just, well, in fact, there's not much to put in there for the details. So let's go back to the list and let's just delete this one. All right. All right, so we've got the users, because that's what they put in the book, as is shown there on the bottom of page 202. So there was users. Boom, click create, and there it is. All right. Let's next do the fixing the navigation bar style issues, which are on the next couple pages here. So the author says, at the moment, the navigation bar has a couple of issues. The first is the text is split over 2 lines, but more annoyingly, there is now an overlapping of the content below it, kind of what they're talking about right here. Here, the heading for roles is not displayed. It says, first, let's fix this overlapping issue, since sometimes the menu may appear over 2 lines. To start with, go to the layout. Remember, this _layout.cshtml file is the file that can conceivably be used as a view file, or for all the view files to kind of move to it, so that's kind of the starting point. All right, modify the div within the navbar class and change it from fixed top to static top. This will make the navbar disappear off the screen when scrolling and push the rest of the content down below it, so that the roles heading text right there is now visible on the screen. So notice we couldn't see roles there, and now we can. All right, I'm not sure when we ran ours if we could or not, so as always, let's go back in. Oh, there it is. We don't even have to rerun it. Okay? Having set the navigation bar to be fixed, there is another issue that a blank white space has appeared above it. To fix this, update the site to remove the padding top 50x and change it so that it now reads padding bottom 20bx. So in other words, instead of having 50 pixels at the top, we're now having 20 pixels at the bottom. Finally, to make the navigation bar wide enough to accept all the text and not wrap over 2 lines, modify it so the max width property of the class is set to 1300 inside of a media query for anything over 1200 pixels. Remember, with a media query, what we're saying is, and they cover this in part 2 of the book, but we've talked about it, this says for any device that has a minimum width of 1200 pixels, which probably is going to be like a desktop machine, all right, then set our width to 1300 so that everything shows on the same line. Now with ours, all right, everything doesn't show on the same line. But I think if we looked at our size, it's not 1300. And that's the reason why. All right, so if I'm running this on a laptop, all right. So it says with these 2 changes in place, the nav bar, again, if we're running it on a bigger machine, it'll now look like this. All right. I am at 17 minutes, and I'm going to go into editing a roll, but before I do, I will make sure that I do that on the next part of this presentation.